That came out of nowhere. No one was prepared for that. On Thursday, February 27th, Prime Minister Abe called for the closure of all elementary, junior high schools, and senior high schools in order to mitigate the coronavirus outbreak. And because compulsory education in Japan is until senior high school level, that essentially means all schools nationwide are temporarily closed. During the entire month of March, that means students are expected to stay home. And just because there are no classes for the majority of schools in March, that doesn't mean that schools are more or less free during that time. Now, because the school year in Japan starts and ends in the springtime, meaning that it starts in the beginning of April and ends in the end of March, and this is especially an important time, not to mention stressful time, for junior high school students transitioning into senior high school. So you can probably see why this nationwide announcement is putting a huge damper on the education system. This is not only going to affect the enrollment system of all high schools across the country, it's also going to be affecting a lot of the admission processes of junior high school students. And really the biggest problem regarding this announcement is that because a lot of the schools function on a state level, how each district will be affected, and more importantly, how each school will interpret that will be different on the local level. Both my husband and I work in the education sector. My husband works at a private university and I work at a senior high school. Universities are handling this a little differently because they are not considered compulsory education, and therefore they are responding to the government announcement in a different way. A majority of the universities in Japan are actually private institutions, so how they handle things in this time is on a very individual level. I, on the other hand, do work for a public institution, which means that we do have to bend to the government's calls. And this announcement has basically sent all staff members to act like chickens running around with their heads cut off. We have no idea what to do in response to this very vague, very ambiguous announcement. Because during the month of March, a lot of things happen, especially at the administration level, regarding final exams, graduation ceremonies, graduation trips, entrance exams, and the enrollment process. March is one of the busiest times of the year for schools in order to make way for the new school year in April. The temporary closure of schools means that students are no longer allowed on school grounds. And this poses a problem for double-income families in which both parents are working, because all of a sudden the government has decided that children have to stay home now, and that means somebody has to take care of them. In response to this, a lot of workplaces are giving parents and caregivers special leave if they have a child that is age 15 and under. So we just talked about how it's affecting the education sector, and because I'm directly involved, I'm able to share with you like first-person insight on what it's doing at our current work environment and how it's being interpreted and taken into action. So let's step outside of the education sector and let's look into other sectors, because it's affecting a lot of other sectors. What this announcement has done is basically it has hammered a nail down into the seriousness of this epidemic. Compared to other nations, it's been noted that Japan was especially delayed in taking initiative in order to combat this threat of the coronavirus outbreak. In the past month, it was more like a snowball effect in which people were starting to realize that it was probably a lot more serious than they thought. And one of the first big responses led to the selling out of masks nationwide. In pharmacies, drugstores, convenience stores, supermarkets, there has been a severe shortage of face masks nationwide. A month later, they're still sold out with very little restock and very little notice that they will get restocked in the near future, even though the government was willing to subsidize to mask manufacturers. Ironically, in response to that, mask manufacturers have said that they never really promised that they will be able to increase production of face masks. Just because the government hands you a bunch of money doesn't necessarily mean that you can install assembly lines in a very short amount of time in order to up production. So to this day, we are still looking at empty shelves upon empty shelves of no mask stock. Unfortunately, this has led to a 300 to 500% price increase of face masks of third-party retailers online, and it's still climbing week by week because there is still very little supply of face masks to go around. And obviously, this is a very frustrating circumstance because how can you protect yourself if you don't have the means to? This has also led to a shortage of other supplies such as hand disinfectant, alcoholic disinfectant, wet wipes, alcohol wipes, whatever you name it. They're even limiting purchases of these per household or per person. Like there's a limit of 3 packs of alcohol wipes per household or a limit of 1 bottle of disinfectant per person. And that limit can be found in almost any store that sells those kinds of things. That was like the first panic response Japan took to the coronavirus outbreak. Very recently, there was another panic response that started off as a social media rumor, which claimed that there will soon be a short supply of tissue paper and toilet paper because they are halting imports from China in response to the coronavirus. So that sent a lot of people in different parts of Japan. They raided grocery stores, drugstores, pharmacies, cleared all stock of tissue papers and toilet papers. And it's just ridiculous. It just shows you how one little rumor can send almost the entire country into a state of panic, because that wasn't true at all. It got to the point where the mayor of Kumamoto had to step in and reassure everyone that tissue paper and toilet paper are almost entirely manufactured in Japan and therefore doesn't warrant this panic buy. Then on Friday, February 28th, 2 of Japan's biggest theme parks, Tokyo Disneyland and Universal Studios Japan, announced that they will be closing their gates from February 29th all the way until March 15th. And that's a pretty big deal because March is one of the most bankable months for any entertainment facility, especially for theme parks. Because let's remember that the school year ends in March, which means a lot of students are free. That's when a lot of graduation trips and the final hurrahs are celebrated before they transition to the next educational stage of their life. I would even go as far as saying it is the busiest month for Tokyo Disney, because almost every day in the month of March they're seeing really high numbers because these are students and their families. And you know, it's not just the theme parks that are shutting down temporarily. We're also seeing this in other entertainment facilities like baseball games, concerts, kabuki theater, and public facilities such as museums have announced they're also shutting down. Even famous tourist locations like Nara and Kyoto have seen a sharp drop in visitor numbers. This is also hurting the retail sector, especially that of restaurants and event halls, because March is the end of the fiscal year, so a lot of companies like to host big parties to celebrate the end of the year. But with the official announcement of the closure of schools, this has created essentially a domino effect of the closure of many facilities, many public events. In short, Japan is responding to this crisis by restricting the gathering of large numbers of people. What this means is that March will see a huge hit in the local economy, which is the entire opposite of what it usually is, because it is one of the most profitable times, especially for the retail sector and the entertainment industry. We are essentially entering a critical time of observation and caution. A lot of things are still very much up in the air. Anything can happen. I mean, look at the sudden call for nationwide school closures. That came out of nowhere. No one was prepared for that. And as a foreigner living in Japan, it's an eye-opener to see how not only the nation reacts, but also how individuals respond. I know this is way off from what I usually do here on my channel, but this is currently the state of the country where I live now. So I'm able to share with you with what's been happening in Japan and how it's been affecting me on a personal level. As for me and my family, we are safe for the most part because we live in an area that doesn't have such a high number of cases, unlike Hokkaido, which is the northernmost prefecture of Japan. But it seems like the number of cases is slowly increasing by trickling its way down from the north to the south. We are very much taking cautionary measures because both my husband and I do commute to work. We take public transportation, we take the train, and as you know, that does increase the likelihood of the risk of infection. So if you could send good vibes our way so that we can continue to be in good health, we'd really appreciate that. So that's what it's been like living in Japan under the scare of the coronavirus. If you'd like to support me, a thumbs up is always appreciated, and I hope you'll subscribe and hit that bell. Thanks so much for spending time with me, and I'll see you in the next video.